The cowboy promised, "I'll take you to Mama," even if it meant losing everything. The land stretched far and wide under the fading light of the evening sun. The open fields of the west were quiet, except for the soft sound of wind moving through dry grass. The sky above slowly changed from bright gold to deep orange, and then to a calm shade of purple. It was the kind of evening that made everything feel peaceful, but also a little lonely. On a narrow dirt path near an old wooden barn stood a cowboy named Ethan Cole. He was not a famous man, and he did not own much land. His clothes were simple, his boots were worn, and his hat had lost its perfect shape long ago. Life had not been easy for him, but he had learned to stay strong and steady like the mountains in the distance. Ethan's horse, a calm brown animal named Dusty, stood nearby, quietly chewing grass. Dusty had been with him for many years, through long travels and difficult days. The horse seemed to understand Ethan without words, as if they shared the same thoughts. Inside the barn, a small boy named Tommy sat on an old wooden box. Tommy was thin, with messy hair and tired eyes. He looked around 7 years old, but his face carried a seriousness that no child should have at that age. In his hands, he held a small wooden toy horse. It was simple and worn, but he never let it go. Tommy had been living in this area for a few weeks after being separated from his mother. She had gone to a distant city for work, hoping to return soon, but days turned into weeks, and no one came back for him. The people around him tried to help, but they were busy with their own lives. Tommy often felt like he was waiting in a world that had forgotten him. Then Ethan arrived. It had happened one afternoon when Ethan stopped near the well for water. He had noticed the boy sitting alone in the dust, staring at nothing. Something about Tommy reminded Ethan of his own childhood, long days of waiting, hoping, and not knowing what would come next. From that day, Ethan began to check on him regularly. He brought food, spoke kindly, and listened when the boy talked. Slowly, Tommy started to trust him. Now, as the evening grew darker, Tommy stepped out of the barn and looked at Ethan. His small voice broke the silence. "Are you really going away tomorrow?" he asked. Ethan adjusted his hat and looked at the horizon. "Yes," he said gently. "I have work in another town. I cannot stay here forever." Tommy lowered his eyes. "Then I will be alone again." Ethan turned toward him. The words hit him harder than he expected. He knew the boy had already been alone for too long. "You won't be alone," Ethan said. Tommy looked up quickly. "But you are leaving." Ethan took a slow breath. He walked closer and sat down on a wooden step so he was closer to Tommy's height. The wind moved softly around them. "I made you a promise," Ethan said. Tommy held his toy horse tightly. "About my mother?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. I told you I will take you to her." Tommy looked uncertain. "But nobody knows where she is." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "We will find her. Maybe it will take time. Maybe we will have to travel far. But we will try." Tommy hesitated. "Why would you do that for me?" Ethan looked at the boy for a long moment. His expression was quiet, but strong. "Because no child should be left wondering where his mother is," he said. "And because a promise means something in my life." A small silence followed. The sound of crickets began to fill the night. The stars were slowly appearing above them, one by one, like tiny lights waking up in the sky. Tommy stepped a little closer. "What if it is hard?" Ethan gave a slight smile. "Then we take one step at a time." "What if people don't help us?" Tommy asked again. "Then we still try," Ethan replied. Tommy looked at him carefully, as if trying to decide whether to believe these words. Slowly, he asked, "Will you really not leave me?" Ethan placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "I will not leave you," he said. "Not until I take you to your mother. Even if it means I lose comfort, time, or everything I own." Those words settled deeply in the quiet night. Tommy did not fully understand everything, but he understood enough. For the first time in a long time, he felt like someone was standing beside him without planning to disappear. The wind grew softer. Dusty the horse let out a calm breath. The barn creaked lightly as the night settled around them. Ethan stood up slowly and looked toward the open road. Somewhere beyond those endless paths was a journey waiting for them. He did not know how long it would take or what challenges they would face, but he knew one thing clearly. He had made a promise to a child, and now that promise had become the direction of his life. The morning came slowly over the wide western land. A soft golden light spread across the hills, touching the dry ground and the small wooden barn where Ethan Cole had spent the night. The air was cool, and everything felt quiet, as if the world was still thinking about what would happen next. Ethan was already awake. He stood near his horse, Dusty, checking the small bags tied to the saddle. Inside were basic supplies, some food, a water bottle, and a folded map that showed the nearby towns. It was not a perfect map, but it was enough to guide them forward. Behind him, Tommy slowly walked out of the barn. He looked tired, but also nervous. He held his small wooden horse tightly in his hand, as if it was the only thing keeping him calm. Ethan noticed him and gave a small nod. "You ready, kid?" Tommy hesitated. "I think so." Ethan smiled slightly. "Thinking is enough for now." The boy walked closer to Dusty, looking up at the tall horse. "Is he safe?" Ethan placed a hand on Dusty's neck. "Safer than most people I know." That made Tommy feel a little better. Slowly, Ethan helped the boy climb onto the horse. Tommy sat carefully, holding the saddle tightly with both hands. Ethan followed and sat behind him, making sure he was secure. "Hold on," Ethan said gently. And just like that, they began their journey. The horse moved forward at a steady pace, walking along the dusty road that stretched into the distance. The barn slowly disappeared behind them, becoming smaller and smaller until it was just a dot in the wide land. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of Dusty's hooves against the ground filled the silence. The wind moved softly, and the world felt big and unknown. After some time, Tommy spoke. "Ethan." "Yes? Do you think my mama will remember me?" Ethan looked down at the boy's head. He could feel the uncertainty in his voice. "Of course she will," Ethan said. "A mother never forgets her child." Tommy stayed quiet for a moment. "What if she moved again?" Ethan thought carefully before answering. "Then we find her again." The boy nodded slowly, but his grip on the saddle did not loosen. As they traveled further, the land around them began to change. The empty fields slowly turned into small patches of trees and scattered houses. They passed a few farmers working on their land. Some waved at them, others simply watched as they passed by. At one point, they stopped near a small water stream. Dusty lowered his head to drink. Ethan helped Tommy get down so he could stretch his legs. Tommy looked at the water carefully. "Everything feels so big out here," he said. Ethan sat on a rock nearby. "That's the West, big and quiet." "Is it always like this?" Tommy asked. Ethan smiled a little. "Not always. Sometimes it gets busy. Sometimes people come and go so fast you forget their names." Tommy sat beside him. "Do you forget people too?" Ethan looked at the water for a moment. "I try not to." The boy picked up a small stone and threw it gently into the stream. The ripples spread across the surface. "I don't want to forget my mama," Tommy said softly. "You won't," Ethan replied. "That's why we are going to her." After a short rest, they continued their journey. The sun moved higher in the sky, making the day warmer. The road became slightly rougher, and Dusty had to slow down. By afternoon, they reached a small village. It had a few wooden houses, a general store, and a small cafe near the center. People moved around, talking and working. Ethan decided to stop there for supplies. Inside the store, the owner, a middle-aged man with a kind face, greeted them. Ethan bought some extra food and asked simple questions about nearby towns. Tommy stayed close, quietly observing everything. It was the first time he had seen so many people in one place since his journey began. Outside, a woman passing by noticed Tommy and smiled. "He's a quiet one," she said kindly. Ethan nodded. "He's had a long journey already." The woman didn't ask more. She simply wished them luck and walked away. As they left the village, Tommy looked back one more time. "Are all places like that?" "Some are," Ethan said. "But every place has its own story." The road ahead stretched long again, disappearing into the horizon. The sky was starting to change color once more, preparing for evening. Tommy leaned slightly against Ethan as they rode. "Ethan." "Yes, kid." "Do you ever get tired of promises?" Ethan looked ahead at the road. His voice was calm. "No," he said, "because some promises are the only thing that keep a person moving forward." The evening light slowly faded as Ethan Cole and young Tommy moved deeper into the unknown land. The road beneath Dusty's hooves had become rougher, filled with small stones and dry patches of cracked earth. The wind was calmer now, but it carried a strange feeling, as if something ahead was waiting for them. Tommy sat quietly in front of Ethan on the horse. He was more comfortable now than before, but his eyes still carried worry. Every new town they passed made him think about his mother a little more. Every face he saw made him wonder if she could be somewhere nearby. Ethan noticed this silence. "You're thinking too much again," Ethan said gently. Tommy looked back slightly. "I can't stop thinking." Ethan nodded. "Thinking is fine, but don't let it take away your hope." The boy looked forward again. What if we never find her? Ethan did not answer quickly. He kept his eyes on the road. After a few seconds, he spoke in a calm voice. Then we keep looking. The answer was simple, but it gave Tommy a little strength. After several hours of travel, they saw lights in the distance. A small town appeared at the edge of the horizon. It was not big, but it looked more active than the village they had passed earlier. Wooden buildings stood close together, and a small water tower rose above them. This might be a good place to ask questions, Ethan said. Tommy straightened slightly. Do you think someone here knows my mama? We don't know, Ethan replied. But every town has memories. We just need to find the right person. As they entered the town, people turned their heads to look at them. A cowboy and a young boy on horseback was not something that went unnoticed. Some people nodded politely, others just continued their work. Ethan stopped near a small general store. A bell rang as he pushed the door open. Inside, the shopkeeper, a thin man with glasses, looked up. Evening, the man said. Evening, Ethan replied. We are looking for information. The shopkeeper leaned on the counter. About what? A woman, Ethan said. She might have passed through here a few weeks ago, traveling for work. She has a young son. Tommy stepped closer, holding his toy horse tightly. The shopkeeper looked thoughtful. There are many travelers in and out of this town. Hard to remember everyone. Ethan stayed calm. She may have mentioned a child, or stayed near here for a night. The man scratched his head. Wait, I do remember someone like that. A woman asking about transport to the city. She stayed at the small boarding house near the river. Tommy's eyes widened. That's her, he whispered. Ethan turned slightly toward him. Maybe. The shopkeeper continued. She was kind, quiet, worried about something, left early the next morning. Which direction did she go? Ethan asked. East, the man said, toward the larger city. Ethan nodded slowly. Thank you. As they left the store, Tommy could not hold his excitement. She was here. She was really here. Ethan helped him onto the horse again. It's a lead, not the end. But it means we are close, right? Tommy asked. Closer than before, Ethan said honestly. They found a small place near the edge of town to rest for the night. It was a quiet area with a few trees and soft grass. Dusty was tied nearby, resting after the long ride. Tommy sat on a log, staring at the stars. His energy had changed. Hope had slowly replaced fear. Do you think she missed me? He asked suddenly. Ethan sat beside him. I think she never stopped thinking about you. Tommy smiled a little for the first time in a while. Then I have to find her fast. Ethan looked at him. We will. A short silence followed. The night was peaceful, but Ethan's eyes stayed alert. He had learned that journeys like this often changed suddenly. Information was good, but it also meant the road ahead would become more serious. Tommy leaned slightly against him. Ethan? Yes? Why are you doing all this for me? You could have just kept traveling alone. Ethan looked at the sky before answering. Because when I saw you alone that day, I saw something I could not ignore. Tommy waited. I saw a child who deserved to go home, Ethan continued, and I decided I would help, no matter what it takes. The boy stayed quiet, but his expression softened. Even if it costs you everything? Tommy asked again, remembering the promise. Ethan nodded slowly. Yes. The wind moved gently through the trees. The stars above looked steady and bright. Far ahead, in the direction they were now heading, the larger city waited, a place full of answers, and maybe challenges they had not yet imagined. But for now, there was only the road, the night, and a promise that refused to break. The next morning arrived with a soft golden light spreading over the quiet edge of the town. The air felt fresher than before, and the sky looked clear and open. Ethan Cole stood near Dusty, checking the horse one last time before they continued their journey east. Tommy was already awake. He stood a little distance away, holding his small wooden horse tightly. There was something different in his eyes now. Hope had grown stronger inside him after hearing that his mother had passed through the previous town. Ethan noticed the change. "You're ready to move?" he asked. Tommy nodded quickly. "Yes, I want to find her." Ethan gave a calm smile. "Then we don't waste time." They mounted Dusty and continued the journey toward the city. The road became wider as they moved forward. More wagons passed by, and more travelers appeared along the way. The land slowly changed from open fields to busier paths, and small buildings started appearing more often. Tommy looked around with curiosity. "Everything feels faster here," he said. Ethan replied, "City life is always like that. People move quickly, but sometimes they forget to look around." After many hours of travel, the large city finally appeared in the distance. It was bigger than anything Tommy had ever seen. Tall buildings stood close together and smoke rose gently from chimneys. The sound of many voices, horses, and wheels filled the air. Tommy's eyes widened. Is this where she is? Ethan looked ahead carefully. This is where our search becomes harder, but also more possible. As they entered the city, everything felt crowded. Streets were full of people walking in different directions. Shops lined both sides of the road, and signs hung above doors. Dusty moved slowly through the busy paths. Ethan stopped near a small inn. We should start here, he said. Inside, the innkeeper greeted them politely. Ethan asked the same question again, describing Tommy's mother. The innkeeper thought for a moment. A woman like that. Yes, I remember her. She stayed here for one night. Very polite. She asked about work offices in the city center. Tommy stepped forward quickly. Do you know where she went after that? The innkeeper nodded. She went toward the employment building near the main square. Ethan thanked him and immediately took Tommy outside. Main square, Tommy repeated. We're close, right? We are getting closer, Ethan said, but we still need to be careful. Big cities can confuse people easily. They moved through the crowded streets, asking a few more people along the way. Some did not know, but one old vendor finally gave them a clear direction. Yes, the vendor said. I saw a woman matching that description. She works at a sewing workshop near the central road. Big blue building. Tommy's heart started beating faster. That's her. I know it is. Ethan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Then we go there. They followed the direction quickly. After a few turns and busy crossings, they finally saw it, the blue building. It was not very tall, but it stood out clearly among the others. Tommy stopped for a moment. What if it's not her? Ethan knelt beside him. Then we try again. But I think we are at the right place. Tommy took a deep breath and walked forward. Inside the workshop, many women were working carefully with cloth and thread. The room was filled with soft sounds of sewing machines and quiet conversation. Tommy looked around nervously. Then suddenly, he stopped. At the far end of the room, a woman looked up. She had tired eyes, but when she saw Tommy, her hands froze. The needle slipped from her fingers. For a moment, everything became silent. Tommy? She whispered. The boy's eyes filled instantly with tears. Mama! He ran forward as fast as he could. The woman rushed toward him, dropping everything, and knelt down as he reached her. They held each other tightly, as if they were afraid to let go again. Ethan stood quietly near the door, watching the moment. He did not interrupt. He simply watched a promise finally come true. Tommy's mother held his face gently. I looked for you, she said softly. Every day I tried to come back. I found you, Tommy said through tears. Ethan brought me. The woman looked up and finally noticed Ethan standing there, her eyes filled with gratitude. You brought him all this way? She asked. Ethan nodded. I made a promise. She stood up and walked toward him. I don't know how to thank you. Ethan shook his head slightly. Just take care of him. That's enough. Tommy ran back and held Ethan's hand tightly. Will you stay? Ethan looked at him gently. My road is still long, kid. Tommy looked sad for a moment. Then Ethan smiled softly and added, but I will always remember you. The boy smiled again, holding both his mother and Ethan's hand for a moment. Outside, the city continued its busy life, unaware of the small miracle that had just happened inside the blue building. Ethan stepped back slowly, giving them space. He looked at Tommy one last time. The promise had been fulfilled. And even though it had cost him time, comfort, and many long days on the road, he did not feel loss. He felt peace. As Ethan walked away into the busy streets, Dusty waiting outside, the wind moved gently through the city. Somewhere behind him, a boy had finally found his home again. And a cowboy, true to his word, had proven that even in a world full of distance and uncertainty, a promise could still lead someone back where they belong. And so, under the slowly darkening sky, the cowboy and the boy continued their journey, one step closer to a promise that could change both of their lives forever.